We are about to look into the pages of the first continuous recorded history of mankind in the book we call the Holy Bible. We're going to investigate some of its most controversial stories and discover the answers to some very tough questions. Is the Bible a reliable account of miraculous interventions that rescue people from sudden doom and destruction? Or is it merely a collection of legends and myths, as some modern-day critics claim? Leading experts, both Bible skeptics and proponents from throughout the world, have contributed to the discussion of these biblical questions that may shock and surprise you. High on a mountaintop in eastern Turkey, hidden beneath an icy glacier, is an important link to our distant past. Reports say it's a 5,000-year-old wooden ship with stalls and cages on board. From actual eyewitnesses, you will discover for the first time the real truth behind the age-old legend of Noah's Ark. You will witness never-before-seen aerial photos and satellite images that provide amazing new proof about the mystery that lies high atop Mount Ararat. You will hear fascinating eyewitness accounts from people who themselves have seen and photographed the ancient ship. This program will give us exciting information on these questions that have puzzled historians and scientists for thousands of years. Could the ancient legends be true? Is this Noah's Ark? Has Noah's Ark actually been found high atop Mount Ararat, buried beneath the ice and snow? The Ark is probably the best known and most debated religious artifact in the world. Ark researchers and scholars have raised many serious and controversial questions.
Why do we get some reports that people have claimed to have seen the Ark on Mount Ararat, yet dozens of well-financed expeditions have gone up there looking for it and have come back empty-handed? Either it's up there or it's not.
Are the reported sightings of the Ark on Mount Ararat in Turkey the delusions of religious fanatics? Are they perhaps just innocently mistaken eyewitness reports? If so, how can we account for the ancient wood and artifacts found high on this treeless mountain? For many years, we thought the ultimate answers to these questions were lost to the ages. But now, modern scientific technology and new archaeological explorations are beginning to unravel many of the long-forgotten secrets of the Noah story. Our continuing quest for Noah's Ark centers on this totally treeless volcanic peak which borders on Iran and the former Soviet Empire. Mount Ararat rises to nearly 17,000 feet, covering 24 square miles. For a personal perspective of this forbidding mountain and its endless challenges, we visited with Dr. John Morris, a geology professor who has led 15 expeditions to Mount Ararat.
I've climbed mountains all over the world, but Mount Ararat is, I guess, it's brutal. It's just the worst I've ever climbed. Actually, from the south side, when you look at the mountain, it looks like a nice volcanic cone, but then on the opposite side, there's this incredible canyon called the Ohora Gorge. It's about 1.5 times the height of the Grand Canyon. There are vertical rock walls. I'm convinced they're unclimbable. It's covered with an ice cap year-round, and that ice cap is always eroding these volcanic layers, producing avalanches down below as it erodes along. Every afternoon there's a storm up on the mountain, and the winds sometimes are over 100 miles an hour.
But neither the ominous legends nor the lethal hazards of the climb have ever detoured the thousands of determined answer seekers. They have been challenging the mountain for hundreds of years.
We know that the Chaldean high priest and historian Berosus visited the site about 475 BC, where he wrote considerably of the phenomena he witnessed, stating that it was quite easy to discern the Ark in its resting place high up on the glacier.
Hieronymus, the Egyptian historian of 30 BC, who authored an ancient history of Phoenicia, mentions the Ark's existence on Mount Ararat. Also in the same period, Nicholas of Damascus, the biographer of Herod the Great, told of the Ark's landing near the summit of Ararat and reported that timbers were still there.
Many celebrated men of antiquity made journeys to the awesome mountain. In 1269 AD, renowned explorer Marco Polo wrote in his book, The Travels, that Noah's Ark rests high in the snowy reaches of Mount Ararat.
There is plenty of ancient historical evidence spanning nearly 2,000 years that the Ark is on Mount Ararat. These sightings recorded by prominent historians of the time, along with eyewitness accounts, add significant credibility to the survival of the Ark on Mount Ararat.
By the mid-19th century, global communications helped to shrink the world significantly. This brought Western civilization more information, along with speculation and rumor about reported sightings of Noah's Ark. In 1829, a Russian-born German physician named Friedrich Perot was the first Western explorer on record to scale Mount Ararat. Prior to the climb, Perot visited the Armenian cathedral at Etchmiadzin in Soviet Armenia. There he viewed the cross, which was claimed to be carved of wood brought down from Noah's Ark in 318 AD. Perot wrote that the carving measured 12 inches high, 9 inches across, and was brownish in color. From Etchmiadzin, Perot climbed to the 7,000-foot level of the mountain, where he reached Ahora village. This is where the St. Jacob Monastery was located. There he saw ancient manuscripts and relics from the Ark. In June 1840, 11 years after Perot's expedition, Mount Ararat suffered a tremendous earthquake. The monastery and most of the 2,000 homes and buildings in the area were destroyed by the earthquake. The St. Jacob Monastery and the relics it held literally disappeared under an avalanche of rocks from the shattered mountain. Survivors were few, leaving behind the Ahora Gorge, a rugged canyon deeper than the Grand Canyon. Can there be any doubt that at least some of the Ark seekers actually saw the Ark and brought back proof of its existence? Can skeptics simply write off this vast number of eyewitness accounts and sightings?
I have studied virtually every known historical sighting of the Ark on Mount Ararat. Over the past 150 years, many of these accounts of the sightings have gone into considerable detail. I have compared 34 of these sightings, and I found that there is a tremendous consistency between eyewitnesses, even though they never knew each other. We can choose to believe that all of these reports are based upon lies, or based upon the information presented by the eyewitness accounts. We can choose to believe that the Ark, or some large wooden barge, is on Mount Ararat, if just one of these reports is true.
In 1883, an expedition was sent onto Mount Ararat by the Turkish government to survey damage from a recent earthquake. The expedition team reported the discovery of the forepart of a very old ship jutting out of the ice 14,000 feet up the mountain. Measurements were taken. The Ark was entered, and the team reported seeing several stalls and cages inside the great vessel. Unfortunately, the Turkish report stirred very little international interest because of the current popularity of Charles Darwin's new theory of evolution. In 1902, George Hagopian, an 8-year-old Armenian boy from Lake Van, Turkey, became the youngest Ark eyewitness on record. Young George had accompanied his uncle onto Mount Ararat. This was a summer of particularly warm weather, making the Ark both visible and easily accessible to the young boy and his uncle.
It was huge to see, larger even than any building I had ever seen. My uncle was going to lift me on top, but we had to pile up rocks in order to reach it.
Then George was boosted up and was able to reach the roof of the vessel.
Members of my family had told us stories about coming to the Ark, and now here I was, actually standing on it. Nearby, I could see a hole had been cut in the roof. So I went to it and looked inside. It was just too dark in there to see anything at all. There were pieces broken off here and there, but it was still very solid to walk on. Along the side of the raised section in the middle, there were openings like windows, but there was nothing I could see.
Years after the event, George Hagopian described what he had seen to archaeological illustrator Dr. Alfred Lee.
Up here, George Hagopian, after a 4-year drought, went up with his uncle and saw the ark completely exposed. He also noticed along the side here the wood grain, beautifully fitted joints with wooden dowels. He could see the color of the grain. It was not a stone formation. It was definitely a man-made wooden construction.
All these pieces of beams and wooden planking gleaned from the slopes of Ararat over the centuries seem to beg a question. Being so old, what kind of condition could the ark be in now?
There's been a tremendous earthquake. There's been a great crevasse created here, and a big avalanche, and the ark has split into 2 pieces. And this is what is being seen today.
This, in fact, points up one of the great mysteries having to do with the ark. We wonder, how can the ark, presumably spotted by one person, not be easily found when others go looking for it? Certainly, this would seem to make the occasional reports of ark sightings quite suspect. So, we went looking for answers to this mystery.
This photograph, which was taken by the French Spot satellite in August 1986, indicates that Mount Ararat, pictured here, is permanently year-round covered with glacial ice. On Mount Ararat, there are of course seasonal changes in the weather. The chances of seeing the ark are greatly increased during the warm months of late summer, such as in August or September. However, there are warmer weather cycles occurring every few years which cause increased meltback of the snow-covered summit. It's possible and probably likely that the ark is only visible or accessible during these infrequent periods of warmer temperatures. An expedition coming to find the ark could walk directly over the icebound ship and never know that it's there.
It was in 1916 when the history of ark sightings took another important turn. Shortly after World War I, a Russian pilot, Lieutenant Zabolotsky, told his remarkable story of sighting the ark on Mount Ararat.
I was stationed with a small group of aviators about 25 miles northeast of Mount Ararat. A new high-altitude engine had been installed in one of the planes, and I was sent up for test flight. When I circled the mountain, I spotted a dark structure there, huge, something the size of a battleship. It was a strange-looking craft, but quite clearly a boat with a rounded-over top.
News of Lieutenant Zabolotsky's sighting reached Tsar Nicholas himself. In 1917, the Tsar dispatched 2 companies of soldiers to locate and document this extraordinary find. The soldiers found and measured the ark. They also made a photographic record of the great ship. Unfortunately, these events were unfolding just as the Communist Revolution was breaking out at home. As a result, the reports and photos of this expedition have yet to be found and are presumed lost or hidden in some secret Kremlin vault. However, they were seen. Megan Butler, managing editor of Rignery Gateway Publishers in Washington, D.C., recently published the book Anastasia. It tells the life story of the Russian Tsar's daughter.
There's been controversy about whether or not there ever was a Russian expedition or an ark sighting around the time of 1916 or 1917. Our author spent 20 years researching Anastasia, the last surviving member of the Russian royal family. During one of his personal conversations with her, he was shocked when she started talking about an expedition which her father, the Tsar, had commissioned to go to Mount Ararat and measure and photograph Noah's Ark. She told him she'd actually seen the photographs and the report from the expedition. She also told him she'd worn a cross made from the wood of Noah's Ark.
During World War II, Allied pilots flew many missions in the vicinity of Mount Ararat.
I was in North Africa, stationed with the Signal Installation Battalion doing work for the Army Air Force. a flyer, a good friend of mine, he and I decided to have a cup of coffee one evening. And while in the officers' mess, overheard the conversation of a couple of other officers concerning pictures they took when they were flying over Turkey and over Mount Ararat. And as they looked at the pictures, we become interested and started to look at them too. And some of them said, you know, these could be Noah's Ark. Let me tell you what I saw in these three pictures. First of all three pictures depicted an ice flow that came down over the boat in an angle of something like this. The ice came down, but in this part, as you look at it from the right side, there was an opening down here where it had been tore away. And I could see the various, about 1 and 2 layers here, and also a structure along the side here. There was no question in the minds of these flyers that this was Noah's Ark. And a similar picture was put in the Stars and Stripes in about 1944. But I'm convinced at this time that I was looking at Noah's Ark. There's no question in my mind, and the flyers felt the same way.
The challenges of Mount Ararat, even for the professional climber, are formidable. The search for the Ark, in purely physical terms, can be both enormously difficult and highly dangerous. It's difficult enough to fight the elements in scaling Mount Ararat in search of the Ark, but the political conditions in these parts can often be as unpredictable as the mountain itself. Anyone traveling to Turkey to search for the Ark is putting their personal safety at considerable risk.
To understand this part of the world is to understand a very complex political situation, which is composed of many regional population groups. This part of Turkey used to be known as Armenia. In the beginning of the communist era in Russia, over 200,000 Armenians were wiped out by the Bolshevik regime. The present situation in this area is still very volatile. Two sides of the mountain face hostile neighbors, Iraq and Iran. And even the lower elevations of the mountain are occupied by terrorist groups of one type or another. Plus, Kurdish terrorists have been known to give expeditioneers a great deal of trouble, robbing them and threatening them with death.
Since 1978, educator John McIntosh has been on 8 expeditions to Mount Ararat.
On this particular day, we had climbed up to the 13,500-foot level on the south face of the mountain and proceeded to set up camp for the night. And we heard a lot of noise. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it was pretty clear they wanted us out of our tents. The other people in our group were being ordered out, too. We didn't wait around for them to have to tell us twice. Needless to say, we were pretty happy to get out of there. I guess you'd have to say we were pretty lucky too. These guys were a very tough group. After everything was reported, the Turkish military sent in about 500 troops into the mountain. One terrorist escaped, another was captured, the rest were shot and killed in a gun battle with the soldiers.
A number of recent eyewitness sightings of the Ark on Mount Ararat have taken place.
During the terms of 4 U.S. presidents, from Nixon to Reagan, I always flew aboard Air Force One as a UPI White House photojournalist covering the activities of the president. On this particular occasion, I was flying aboard with then President Jimmy Carter. We were en route from Poland to Tehran, Iran, to attend a New Year's Day celebration given by the Shah. During the flight while we were over eastern Turkey, our attention was called to the window. It was a dramatic moment as Soviet MiG fighter jets were escorting us wing on wing. At the same time, someone told us if we would look down, we would see Noah's Ark. I looked. There, maybe halfway up the rugged mountain, was a large dark boat, clearly visible. It was partially covered with snow or ice. I'm convinced, based upon what I saw there, it was Noah's Ark.
From the air and from the ground, there is, in fact, a growing body of photographic evidence. Pictures which claim to document a large man-made structure high on Mount Ararat. Maybe it's ironic, or perhaps fitting, that those in recent years who have reported being eyewitnesses to the Ark are the most average of people from all walks of life, humble individuals who have no exalted point to prove, no book to sell, no doctorate to foist upon the world. We've located 3 people who had unique encounters with Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. We sought them out. Not one of them is writing a book about their experience. None preaches from the pulpit. In each case, their experience of seeing the Ark was very moving and highly personal. It was in 1973 that Ed Behling became an eyewitness to the Ark. Ed Behling was a serviceman assigned to a defense installation located about 100 miles southwest of Mount Ararat. Once there, he struck up a friendship with a Turkish army recruit named Mustafa.
I made it a goal when I left the United States to go to Turkey to see as much as I could. Mustafa and I got along very well. He was in the army at that time about a year. I was talking to Mustafa and telling him how I wanted us to go up and see the Ark. He said he had a great uncle that knew where the Ark was, and his great uncle was going to take us up to it. So it was kind of exciting, you know. Boy, I'm on an adventure. We found ourselves at this old tent, this old camp. Mustafa's great uncle. He knew it all, basically. He was the elder of all. His uncle seemed kind of reluctant to take us up there. You know, I'm talking to Mustafa, he says, you know, well, I convinced him that you're okay.
Locals who live here are very suspicious of outsiders. Without this local connection, this visit to the Ark would have been impossible.
I asked him to take a camera, but he preferred that I didn't. He said, Ararat is close to the Russian border, and you're American, I'm Turkish. That could cause some uncomfortable situations. Mustafa's great uncle took us right up the side of this mountain, and we were going around rocks and above cliffs and below cliffs. It was like a trail. He knew exactly where he was going. And I'm tired and I'm winded, and it's, oh boy, when is this ever going to end? When are we going to see the Ark? If we don't see it pretty soon, I want to go back. His uncle turns around and laughs at me, and he points down. And then all of a sudden you look down, and here's this huge, awesome ship sitting below you in this fog. You know, it's almost like you picture a dream, and there it is. We walked down around beneath it, and we wound up, I would say, 175, 100 feet below it, because it was sitting on a shelf, a cliff. And we looked up and saw it from there. The mouth of it, if we were looking at the end, from the end, it was basically square. However, it was wider than it was tall. The sides were jagged and ripped up a little bit, and I could see what resembled planks. Compared to the hill, the cliff that it was on, it still looked enormous. It's hard to imagine. And I think about it in my mind's eye, and it's still hard to imagine.
In 1943, another serviceman stationed in the Middle East was Ed Davis. Like Ed Behling, Mr. Davis was befriended by a young man, a civilian, who worked for him over there named Abbas Abbas. He returned the favor by taking him up to see Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat.
At that particular time, you couldn't see the Ark. When you got where you could see it, he would come back and get me. A couple of months later, he come back. He said, we can see it, let's go. We were all tied together, about 20 feet apart with a big rope. I was never as cold, as wet, as hungry, and tired in my life as I was when I got up there. He was trying to show me the Ark. When I was standing, it looked like a big piece of blue rock. And then we moved back, and then we could see in the end of it. It was awesome. You knew somebody was watching you. There was something going on. I don't know how to explain that feeling, but you knew someone or something. Well, it was just a mighty power someplace there present. It was Noah's Ark.
Ed Davis's overall story sounds very credible. He was told by his guide it was the Ark. He is convinced that what he saw on Mount Ararat was indeed the sacred Ark of Noah. Still, in hearing a story like that of Ed Davis's, it's understandable to be skeptical of these kinds of claims. Author and art researcher Larry Williams felt the same way.
When I heard Ed Davis's story of Noah's Ark, I thought not only should I investigate the story, but that I had to personally investigate Ed Davis. I publish a newsletter for treasure hunters and people looking for archaeological sites. As such, I've traveled throughout the world investigating sites and stories. One thing I've learned is you can't trust most of the stories.
Publisher Larry Williams meant business when he decided he wanted Ed Davis to sit for a lie detector test.
I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and hired a top polygraph expert with about 15 years of experience on a police force. I told him the Ed Davis story, and he said, "Larry, give me half an hour with this guy and I'll break him." After 2 real intense hours, the polygraph expert came out and said, "Larry, I can't tell you what mountain Ed Davis was on. I can't tell you if it was Noah's Ark, but I'll tell you this. Ed Davis saw a boat, and Ed Davis is not lying."
Faith played a big part in the eyewitness account of this man, Dr. Ahmet Ali Arslan. Dr. Arslan is the Washington bureau chief for a major Turkish newspaper and a former broadcaster for the Voice of America radio network. But he knows Mount Ararat like few people do.
My family lives in Ararat, the Turkish town between Mount Ararat and former Soviet Union. I grew up there, and I climbed more than 50 times to the summit of Mount Ararat, including with many internationally recognized explorers like Fernand Navarra and astronaut the late Jim Irwin. In 1989, I climbed to the northern part of Mount Ararat, which is upper side of Ahura Gorge, the most dangerous site of Mount Ararat, covered with huge glaciers and very dangerous crevasses. Because of my Turkish nationality, I was given permission to investigate on certain areas on Mount Ararat where the others could not go. I went to check a certain area which had been shown in a satellite photo as a possible location of Noah's Ark. I was coming close to the site. Suddenly, the ice and snow began to give away. I ended sliding about 100 feet. It was fortunate that I didn't fall in the crevasses. Otherwise, I would be dead. When I regained my footing, I noticed 100 or 200 feet away, there was building type of structure, definitely made of wood. It shouldn't be there, just 1,000 or 2,000 feet below the summit. It almost looked like a captain's cabin. I immediately took my camera and shot pictures. You can see straight, flat beams and such. Definitely appears man-made structure. My belief is that what I saw and what I took in my photographs definitely, without question, is Noah's Ark.
It would be hard not to be impressed by the testimony of these eyewitnesses. They are living people whose stories can be corroborated and directly questioned. People who were all on the mountain at different times over nearly half a century who tell a story that is remarkably the same. So far, we have presented a number of 20th century civilian and military aerial sightings of Noah's Ark, along with the modern-day eyewitness accounts of George Hagopian, Ed Behling, Ed Davis, and Ahmet Arslan. But is there one single factor that all these accounts have in common to help us actually find the Ark for the world to see? The answer is yes, the Ark's location on Mount Ararat. All sightings have been on the north side of Mount Ararat above the Ahura Gorge.
In an August 1990 helicopter expedition around Mount Ararat, we flew over the glacier on the northeast face of the mountain. At that time, we took this photograph of the rectangular object we believed to be the Ark of Noah.
So, we have the photographs shot by the Carl Baugh Group where the shape of an object in the glacier could be seen. But we took that a step further, having the photograph computerized for analysis.
Now we're seeing a computer image of the primary object identified by satellite. As we enhance the computer image of this object, we can see that the object is rectangular in shape. Here, this is the outline, and the object extends over a ledge. In my opinion, this is clearly a man-made object.
Our mystery would already be solved if the Central Intelligence Agency and our Defense Department would only release their reconnaissance photos of spy satellite imagery of eastern Turkey. And why won't they?
There at the Strategic Air Command are secret documents right now which have pictures of Noah's Ark. They're even labeled Noah's Ark on the picture.
We know our government has photos and satellite imagery of that area of Noah's Ark. However, they probably won't want to release that because when they do, they'll also disclose just how good our spy technology has become.
Well, since our government would not cooperate in our search to pinpoint Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat, from France, we have imagery from the satellite known as SPOT. The French SPOT satellite imagery, taken 555 miles above the Earth's surface, can identify objects down to 10 meters in size. That's about 30 feet. This was the source of photo reconnaissance used by American fighter pilots in the Gulf War against Saddam Hussein. Interestingly enough, what may be difficult to make out in photographs taken at a distance of 300 to 500 feet on a fog-shrouded mountain may be identified more precisely and scientifically from hundreds of miles above the Earth with the use of three-dimensional animation. We have taken the French SPOT satellite imagery to a Boston company called TASC. It's an applied information technology firm that specializes in 3D terrain animation. It is at TASC that we will continue our search for the Ark at locations pinpointed by satellite. In our animation model, we're approaching Mount Ararat from a couple of hundred miles away. We see Little Ararat in the foreground, and as we approach the two mountains, we're setting our course to fly between them as we go into a circular flight path around Mount Ararat. The animation clearly shows the finger glaciers on the mountain and the deep scar of the Ahora Gorge on the north side, above which the Ark sightings have occurred. The Ahora Gorge is an awesome sight of sheer cliffs all the way up to the Ararat snow line, which continues upward to Ararat's multiple summit peaks. Coming back to the Ahora Gorge, across the Abic glaciers, we're going to examine two locations where parts of the Ark have been pinpointed by satellite as well as by eyewitnesses to determine if we can obtain a better visual perspective of the sites. First, we're going to look directly over the site pinpointed by the SPOT satellite and depicted in photos taken on two different successful Ark expeditions. We will attempt to pinpoint the exact location of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat, as seen by military satellites, eyewitnesses, and photographers.
In this computer lab, we're now seeing on our computer screen SPOT satellite imagery of Mount Ararat. This S-shaped crevasse is about 1,500 feet long and 90 feet wide. In the middle, we see a defined object extending out of the snow over a rocky ledge. Now in this SPOT imagery close-up, we're able to measure the size of this object. We see here the crevasse with the gray pixels defining a rocky ledge. Extending out of the snow in this area, we see an object coming out over the ledge. Each pixel is 32 feet, so this object is about 80 feet wide and extends out of the snow about 90 feet. According to SPOT satellite imagery and helicopter photo enhancement, this rectangular object is not part of the natural terrain. According to military satellite information, the object is made of wood.
Now that is an impressive finding. But there is more as we move to the second site located right on the treacherous upper edge of the Ahora Gorge itself. It is here that experts say there is another broken portion of the Ark protruding from the glacial ice and clearly exposed as the weather permits. It was at this site several years ago that a Dutch TV crew traveling with astronaut James Irwin took a most amazing photograph.
Plane with Jim Irwin on board, flying around the Ararat mountain, and then flying around the Ahora Gorge. On that particular spot, we did see an object sticking out of the snow cap. It looked like the Ark of Noah. We really got excited, but our time of flying was running out. We had to go back to our base. But some of us were really convinced this could well be the Ark of Noah. So on that very last expedition ever made, that got all the permissions of the Turkish government, finally, that afternoon, we think we saw Noah's Ark.
James Irwin didn't want to announce this startling discovery until he could mount a ground expedition to film at the site. Sadly, Irwin died before he could return to Mount Ararat. Astronaut James Irwin's space explorations will be remembered for generations, and thanks to him and Dutch national television, the world has been provided with this most amazing photograph. Perhaps Irwin's personal spiritual quest to find Noah's Ark has been fulfilled as well. There's only one puzzling question that remains. With all the evidence that Noah's Ark has been located on Mount Ararat, why have all the ground expeditions failed to reach it, to touch it, to thoroughly photograph it?
When the Turkish government grants research permits, they are for climbing on the south side of Ararat, while the Ark is located on the north side. Americans caught on the north side are usually arrested. The Ark site is also too treacherous and high to actually land a helicopter expedition. The local terrorists frequently attack, rob, and kidnap the expeditioneers. And finally, in the ongoing battle between Turkish soldiers and the terrorists, over 6,000 people have been killed on the slopes of Ararat during the 1990s. Maybe we'll just have to wait until the world is at peace.
Just as there are some people who are convinced by the easiest evidence, there are others who are skeptical even in the face of the most conclusive proof. In the case of Noah's Ark, there is a third group of people who no longer need to be convinced.
What I saw is Noah's Ark.
It's there. All the people have to do is go up and look at it.
It was awesome. It was Noah's Ark.
You've seen scientific demonstrations, and you've heard the results of the polygraph examination. You've seen the satellite photographs, you've witnessed the stories, and heard the personal testimonies. The evidence is now before you. Well protected and hidden away from the world, the remains of a giant boat have been identified on Mount Ararat. Samples of the wood taken from the vessel have been dated to the time when the Bible indicates a worldwide flood occurred. From this and everything we've seen on this program, what conclusions can be drawn?
You can look at all the stories that come out of that community of nations around Mount Ararat, and they seem to have one central thought that surfaces, and that's the story of Noah. All the evidence leads to the fact that that great ship that's been sighted up there on Mount Ararat has to be the Ark of Noah.
This man, called Noah, demonstrated his faith in epic proportions. Laboring for generations to build the incredible ark, he brought thousands of animals into the ark to survive an impending calamity which no one in his day could conceivably imagine. He asked his family to believe in him, and in return he rescued not only them, but all of us who have descended from him. This is more than the story of a great boat and a great flood. It is also the story of a great man.